Cannabis in safety-sensitive workplaces. Hello, my name is Charles Els and I serve as a clinical professor in the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Alberta. I have no conflicts of interest to declare, and the opinions expressed here do not necessarily reflect those of any collaborator. They are not intended to be a substitute for professional, medical, or legal advice. Irrespective of the cause, impairment can pose a significant risk to everyone at work. In a safety-sensitive position, even a small judgment error or a brief moment of impairment can result in a catastrophe, including serious injury or death. In 2017, the Government of Canada first introduced the Cannabis Act, legalizing cannabis for recreational use, effective October 2018. Cannabis is known to cause intoxication. The question now is, how do we ensure workplace safety and adequately mitigate the risk of impairment in safety-sensitive work settings? What is in cannabis? Cannabis is one of the oldest drugs known to mankind. It has been around for thousands of years. It delivers more than 400 chemicals to the user, including those called cannabinoids. Some of these components are psychoactive, meaning they affect the mind. The human brain is the most complex organ in the body. It consists of billions of nerve cells, also called neurons, which convey signals from one neuron to the next. These electrochemical messages are sent when a neuron releases a neurotransmitter into the gap or synapse between cells. Cannabis and other drugs impact the way neurons send, receive, and process signals via neurotransmitters. Cannabinoids bind to receptors on the membranes of cells in the brain and elsewhere in the body, thereby exerting their effects. Cannabinoid CB1 and CB2 receptors have been characterized, occurring in different parts of the body, and these are activated by so-called endocannabinoids, by exogenous plant-based cannabinoids, and also by synthetic or pharmaceutical prescription drugs. Two of the best studied cannabinoids are tetrahydrocannabinol, also known as THC, and cannabidiol, or CBD. THC is responsible for the euphoria or high, as well as the addictive potential of cannabis. THC content in cannabis has increased over the years, from under around 5% in some batches many years ago to strains with much greater potency today. Ultra-high THC potency products like Shatter, produced with methods like butane extraction, have THC concentrations above 90%. Prevalence. More than half of Canadians over the age of 15 have ever tried cannabis, and about 12% used in the past year. Almost 40% said that they had operated a vehicle within 2 hours of using. About 8% of users reported consuming cannabis before or at work, daily or weekly. Further, cannabis is the most commonly encountered drug in workplace drug testing programs in Canada. What are the effects of cannabis? Different persons experience the effects of cannabis differently, and the effects of cannabis depend on many factors like the dose, the potency, and also whether it's taken with other impairing substances like alcohol. Cannabis use is associated with a wide range of effects in the body and in the brain. Although sometimes challenged, it's widely accepted that cannabis can be addictive. About 9% of those who experiment with a drug become addicted. For daily users, that number can be 25% or higher. Health Canada reminds us that the THC in cannabis can impair a person's ability to operate equipment or to drive safely, because it affects coordination, reaction time, the ability to judge distances, decision-making abilities, as well as the ability to pay attention. Persons using cannabis may have difficulties compensating for the cognitive and performance decrements. considering workability, occupational capacity, and risk. Cannabis negatively impacts on a range of cognitive and performance functions. What we do know is that cannabis, like alcohol, narcotics, and some other drugs, can impair skills required for safe driving, and that it is associated with an increased motor vehicle crash risk. Research suggests that the presence of cannabis results in an increased risk of road traffic accidents. In fact, it more than doubles the risk of a motor vehicle crash. The cognitive skills required for safety-sensitive work tasks are similar to those required to safely operate a vehicle, making driving a suitable comparator for determining levels of impairment for other safety-sensitive tasks. All this considered, cannabis use can foreseeably translate into an increased occupational risk in safety-sensitive work settings. There currently exists no dependable scientific evidence to confirm that cognitive and performance impairment caused by cannabis do not create a problem or concern in safety-sensitive positions. Furthermore, I'm not aware of any licensed producer or manufacturer of cannabis or any other impairing drug who declares that using it is occupationally safe and that it is acceptable for use by persons who work in positions that are safety sensitive. Based on the available scientific evidence, it is concluded that, irrespective of the source, whether legal or illegal, recreational or medically authorized, the use of cannabis is not recommended for persons working in safety-sensitive occupations. Detecting cannabis-related impairment. Urine drug testing, which typically screens for the breakdown product or metabolite of THC, does not detect impairment, but simply reflects exposure to a substance in the recent past. After a single use of cannabis, most persons will test positive for only a few days, while chronic heavy users can test positive for several weeks after the last consumption. Random, unannounced testing for safety-sensitive positions has been considered as a potential measure to reduce occupational risk, but it is not supported as a standalone measure to mitigate risk in safety-sensitive settings. Positive saliva or oral fluid testing may reflect more recent exposure and, as a result, it has been suggested that it may be an indicator of impairment. However, this method has arguably not been sufficiently tested to reliably detect impairment in safety-sensitive settings. Various other tests have been proposed, including standardized field sobriety tests, as well as computer, tablet, and smartphone-based cognitive and performance testing. Although these may be promising future directions, each requires validation in work settings. Blood testing to measure the parent compound, namely THC, offers a measure to detect likely impairment, but because it's so invasive, it may not be a feasible option for routine use in safety-sensitive settings. What has been used is to look for the presence of outward physical signs indicative of consumption. Although varying degrees of expertise exist in drug recognition, it can be difficult even for trained professionals to identify workers who are under the influence of drugs. If, based on observation, there's a reasonable ground to believe that an employee is unable to work in a safe fashion because of the use of alcohol or drugs, steps to mitigate risk are taken, and further evaluation and testing may be done. Reliance on self-report alone to detect impairment is not considered reliable or accurate. That is because persons consuming cannabis may sincerely believe that they are not impaired, while in fact they may well be. In the absence of a legislative standard and readily available validated impairment testing, reasonable suspicion based on outward signs remains a cornerstone for detecting a risk of impairment at work. For how long can a person remain impaired? The answer to this is by no means straightforward, as it may depend on a variety of factors. Unlike alcohol, cannabis-related impairment is more complex because it is fat-soluble, hence it can accumulate in the body. This means that even after discontinuation of use, there's prolonged exposure of the brain to the compound over time, with the potential for impairment. The College of Family Physicians of Canada suggests that persons taking cannabis should be advised not to drive for at least 4 hours after inhalation, 6 hours after oral ingestion, and 8 hours after inhalation or oral ingestion if the person experiences euphoria. Yet, Health Canada suggests that the ability to drive or perform activities requiring alertness may be impaired for up to 24 hours following single consumption. Where do we go from here? Based on what we know and do not know to date, it would appear prudent to err to the side of caution by concluding that the use of cannabis is not compatible with working in safety-sensitive settings. Because there's no established safe level of exposure, a zero-tolerance policy regarding the presence of cannabis at work is currently the only reasonable option. The recommendation is to not perform any safety-sensitive work tasks for at least 24 hours after any consumption, or for longer if impairment persists. If not already updated, this may well be an opportune time for employers to align their workplace drug and alcohol policies to mitigate occupational risk, as well as to ensure adequate access to treatment and accommodation where needed. We need further education and training of both employers and employees on the effects and the risks of cannabis use, as is the recognition of impairment on site, as well as treatment options available to employees with substance use issues. More research is needed on impairment in this field and how to detect and measure it, in light of all the limitations we're facing. To ensure safety of workplaces, there are a few additional measures that would assist with moving forward. Setting a legislative standard for the measurement of cannabis-related impairment in safety-sensitive positions certainly is a priority. Further, the introduction of measures and the regulations confirming the prohibition of cannabis use for employees in safety-sensitive positions is needed. Final comments. Cannabis has been around for a very long time, and it is here to stay. After almost a century of prohibition, Canada was the first of the G7 bloc of highly industrialized democracies to legalize cannabis countrywide for recreational purposes. Impairment resulting from the use of cannabis may threaten occupational safety. Cannabis consumption is, of course, not the only potential cause of workplace impairment, and the focus should always be on addressing all causes, including fatigue. In conclusion, cannabis consumption is not recommended for persons who perform safety-sensitive tasks at work. Workplace safety is our primary concern, and it's a shared responsibility. Just because cannabis is legal does not mean it is safe.